endlessly down waterways, canals, onto rivers, rivers into the ocean, and try desperately to head to another country. A very dangerous journey to try to find your way to Malaysia or Thailand or the Philippines or Indonesia, wherever you might land, and from there become refugees. Others would make it by land out of Cambodia or Laos into Thailand. Interesting connection of Iowa history in all of this process involves Governor Robert Ray. And Governor Ray in 1975 received a letter written by the Thai Dam refugees from Laos. And he held, and the letter written to him and written to every other governor in America was, we are people with a distinct culture. We have our own language, our own way of writing, our own traditions, our own history. And we want so much to all be able to stay together in America so that we can keep our traditions, our language, our culture intact. And if we are spread all over America so that there's only a few of us in each state, all of that will be lost. And they asked every governor, would you please take us? So the only governor who responded was Governor Robert Ray. He convinced the president and the secretary of state and the secretary of health, education, and welfare, who were administering the refugee program, to please let him have all of the Thai Dam. They agreed, and all the Thai Dam came to Iowa in 1975, and then more came later, and they've been here ever since. And there's a wonderful Thai Dam Cultural Center in Des Moines where you can go and visit. I don't know if you've been there, but
we're going this
you're
afternoon.
going. Oh, wow, very good. And you'll see some of the history. You know, Governor Ray passed away in 2018, and his body laid in state at the state capitol, and Iowans could come to pay tribute to him. And the biggest group who were there waiting as his casket arrived were the Thai Dam. A second story about Governor Ray and his role with refugees came in 1979 in January, when he saw a television documentary that showed boat people refugees who had arrived after this long, dangerous journey on land in a country in Southeast Asia. And the local officials, fearful that they would be overrun with refugees, gave them some water and food, and then said, now go someplace else, and pushed the boats back out to sea. And in this documentary, the TV crew just happened to be there when that happened, and the boat was breaking up, and refugees were falling into the ocean and drowning. And you saw the TV documentary, and they were drowning before your very eyes. And Governor Ray was so moved by that. He had such compassion for these people that that night, late at night, he wrote to the president, in this case President Carter, saying, Iowa will double the number of refugees we've accepted if you, Mr. President, you will just reopen America's doors, because we had stopped taking any refugees from Indochina. America, nor any other country in the world, was taking any more refugees from Indochina. And Governor Ray then went and lobbied. And of course, he was a Republican. President Carter was a Democrat. And Governor Ray succeeded. And in June of 1979, I went with him to Geneva, Switzerland, where there was a conference on the boat people, refugees, organized by the UN High Commissioner on Refugees. And at that event, and at all UN events, countries sit each have their own desk and with their name, your country's name on it. And when Vice President Walter Mondale spoke for the United States and said that President Carter was reopening America's doors and would welcome 168,000 refugees a year, and he was sending the U.S. Navy ships to look in the South China Sea to find boat people and pick them up and rescue them, so that they could be safe and they could come to the United States and be welcomed and start new lives. And that change of policy led to close to another million refugees being resettled in the United States. So it was a triumph of the spirit of the refugees, but also a triumph of humanitarian spirit. Out of the tragedy of our foreign policy, as in disgrace, the American ambassador had to flee from Vietnam. The American ambassador had to flee from Cambodia. Out of that tragedy of foreign policy, tragedy of military policy, came the triumph of our humanitarian refugee policy.